What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday, and welcome back to episode 6 of Money Mondays. This is our first live event of 2025, and also the first event we have not one, but two amazing guests for this series. Of course, this event is brought to you by Creator Match, where we match brands with LinkedIn creators. And for this show, we want to talk about how money is moving on LinkedIn, both about how creators are making money, as well as how brands are spending money. And for today, we have, I think, probably the two most incredible people in the marketing world, Lexi and Danielle from Notion. And we're going to dive into this Notion Faces It campaign that completely took over LinkedIn. And before we bring them on the show, I'd love to hear more where everybody is tuning in from. I'm currently in Los Angeles, California. Our family did get evacuated, so I'm at my grandma's house right now, tuning in from a different room. So I hope you guys can hear me. And we really do have our heart go out to all the Southern California folks who were affected by the wildfires. It's been crazy over here, and we really do pray that things do get better. And I'd love to hear more where everybody's tuning in from. Tyler, one of our regulars, let the countdown begin. So excited to welcome everybody to the show. So as we dive into our guests today, the first thing you'll see is these are not normal headshots. These are Notion faces. And Lexi and Danielle are on the influencer marketing team at Notion. So I'm going to welcome them, and we're going to dive deep into the Notion Faces recap and the behind the scenes. So Lexi and Danielle, how are we doing? Where are you guys tuning in from?
Hello, I'm tuning in from San Francisco, doing great, very excited to chat today. And yeah, I'm Lexi, and I do influencer and social at Notion.
Amazing. And I know that Danielle is going to join us in a second as well. She just dropped for a quick second. But it's crazy that most people think that the Notion influencer team is hundreds of people, if not thousands of people. And it's kind of crazy that it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's literally just you and Danielle.
That is correct. It is just myself and Danielle.
I'm so sorry. My art just quit on me. And I apologize for my voice, everyone. I lost it this weekend singing karaoke, so beware of the trap of karaoke. But I'm Danielle. I'm on the influencer team, just me and Lexi. I'm calling in from New York, so excited to be here today.
Amazing. Well, we have so many questions to ask to really dive through the campaign. And of course, myself, I'm the founder and CEO of Creator Match. We match brands with LinkedIn creators. You see some of the logos, obviously Notion being here one. We are partnering this campaign, and we've run hundreds of sponsored posts on LinkedIn. So as we dive into the campaign, the first thing that I'd love to understand is, how did this campaign come about? What were the origins of the Notion Faces campaign?
So I don't know if you all know this, but internally we are given a hand-drawn avatar or portrait whenever we start. And this is very pure to the Notion culture. And I think because we all have these avatars, there has been a demand from our community to have their own. You can even go on, websites like Fiverr, and people will draw your own portrait. So there was definitely a lot of community excitement and demand for this. And then so internally we started building a tool so people could create their own Notion faces or portraits using the same brushes and hand-drawn illustrations that we have internally.
Yeah.
Or go ahead, Lexi.
Well, I was just going to say, we have an artist who is in-house at Notion, and he literally at one point was drawing every single illustration, for every employee. And everything's hand drawn. I think that's what we wanted to put into this avatar generator. Is a lot of people asked us why didn't you use AI? Why can't I upload my photo? And we really wanted to bring back the play and making something and building something, similar to how we say Notion is the building blocks, where you can actually go in and create, and people seem to really enjoy that.
I love it. And one of the craziest things as well that we'll talk a lot about is FOMO, right? Not a lot of campaigns create this fear that you are not part of it, so you want to jump on. And the amount of UGC that came from this, right? The amount of people changing their headshots to the Notion face, even though that they weren't involved in the actual campaign, was crazy. And I'm curious, when we were building this campaign, How did you think about the psychology and the community aspect? And, it's not just the fear of missing out, but it's you get to express yourself with your own Notion face, and there's thousands of variations. So how did you think about those key triggers and leverage psychological drivers in this marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when we were thinking about timing, this is generally a month-long campaign that we run kind of every year. New Year's is a really huge time of the year for us because people are getting back in their, organization, self-improvement eras. And I think we had this really awesome tool that we could supplement our New Year's content with this year. And we wanted to make as big of a splash as possible. And I think kind of like the timing and the platform were both pretty big decision makers when we were trying to think of like, how do we create this viral moment that people want to get involved in and we make sure that they see. And LinkedIn was definitely the platform of choice. One, because you're able to accompany photos with a caption. So again, people could be sharing their stories of how they use Notion or why their face reflects themselves. And also I think the way that the LinkedIn algorithm works and the way that the community is currently behaving on LinkedIn is very high engagement. It's much easier for posts to be seen and travel amongst different industries and communities. So that was, a pretty obvious decision for us there. And then on the timing as well, we could have spaced this out over a full month. So there was always Notion Faces content running. But again, we wanted to make as big of a splash as possible. So I think having everyone go live on that one day really added a lot to this FOMO effect because luckily it kind of worked out where you couldn't log on and not see a Notion face. So it really hit that FOMO effect and people seeing it. I'm like, what is this? Why was I not, where did this come from? Like, how do I get involved? Especially I think on LinkedIn, it's a platform right now where their content's traveling a lot easier. So much easier to execute this on something like a LinkedIn versus an Instagram or a TikTok.
And it's so interesting you said that purposely you wanted to make the biggest splash on one specific day versus spreading it out over weeks or over months. Can you talk about the timing of the campaign? And do you recommend other marketers to think about a big splash moment versus spreading things out over a period of time?
I think it depends. It depends what you're doing, right? I mean, I think Notion Faces again was a brand moment for us and something not like any other campaign that we've run in the past. So for example, we just relaunched Notion AI a few months ago, and that was definitely more of a long tail campaign because we wanted to, drive usage and conversion and make sure that we were really getting as many use cases and, valuable content out over a variety of different time periods where, so we can hit people where they are. I think Notion Faces is like, it's a little bit different, right? Like Notion, we want to get as much content out there with different use cases. So when your time or opportunity where you have a need for Notion, it's right in front of you. But I think for something like Notion Faces, it was, again, much more of a brand moment, something fun. We wanted to spark conversation and bring back that like brand love and joy. So I think for that reason is why we went with the one day, but I think it depends on what you're launching.
And Lexi, I have a question for you. So I think we all can agree that most B2B marketing or even just software companies, it's a pretty common playbook and it's not fun. Like I don't think you can say that those marketing strategies and fun are usually in the same sentence or even in the same orbit. This campaign, I think the first thing you think of is fun, right? How has Notion been able to leverage fun across marketing and still remembering, like I remember I got my physical gift box with my Notion cookies and wrapping paper and New Year, New You, and it was signed by both of you guys. And you forget that it's a software company, right? But it feels like a community. How do you think about fun in, an industry that is not super fun overall?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think Danielle and I both having a consumer background, it helps a lot because we both worked at, consumer brands where you're competing with so many other companies. You have to be that like fun company that's breaking through the noise. And so when I came to Notion, I had never done B2B, let alone B2B influencer marketing. I didn't even know that that could potentially be a thing. But I think when you get down to like the core of how we're influenced, like we're all people at the end of the day, right? Like we have our 9 to 5, but I doubt, everyone in their 5 to 9 is at home continuing to work, like we're all consuming content, and like we want to consume things with brands that we actually like align with emotionally. And so I think the gifting aspect of it is like, I believe in tangible aspects of a brand. Like Notion is a digital product, but when you can hold that brand in your hands, like that's going to create that brand affinity where you're always going to come back to that brand. And I love doing that on the influencer side as well, because if an influencer has a great experience with us, we found that like when one of our competitors reaches out, like when I was at Curology, this happened a lot where someone would reach out from Hims and Hers, and the influencers would text me immediately and being like, hey, I had such a great experience with you guys. Like, I'd rather just work with you again. And I think from a B2B perspective, that holds true as well. Like we all have products we use every day. And so if we can create a fun experience and a great experience when we're working with this influencer, like we know they're going to come back, and we want that too.
And it's so interesting because there was so much love from the campaign, and there were so many people saying, wow, this, and I think we can all agree, factually, this was the biggest creator campaign that LinkedIn has ever seen, which is kind of crazy that we could even say that, and it's still so early. But there were some people that were skeptics, that had some criticism. You can see here, this is a wrap report from our friends, Brett and Leon from SIFSI, and you can see the audience sentiment, which is super high, almost at 8 out of 10. You can see some key themes emerge as well. But around the criticism, some people said that, the creator posts didn't showcase Notion features like Notion AI and question the campaign's ROI potential. How would you respond to this feedback? And what do you think critics might be missing about the campaign's value?
Lexi and I were actually joking that we knew we made it because we were getting hate, or we're not, people were talking about it. So that's how we knew it was successful. No, I think that that's a fair, assumption to have. But I do think that this, at the end of the day was a brand moment for us. It wasn't, intentionally going to drive conversion as much as some of the other product launches that we've done. I don't think anyone internally was, thinking that something like an avatar would do that. But again, this was really for our community and giving back to our community. Again, this is something that they've asked for. We knew that it was something that they would resonate with them. So it wasn't, the audience wasn't intended to be just for new audiences. It was really for our existing users and, the users who have supported us over the years. So I think the posts didn't really have to be about, this is why I love Notion, or like, this is why you should try Notion. I think a lot of the content that I really liked from this campaign was, here is what I do and how Notion enables me to do it, or here's how my life has improved after using Notion, like those sentimental kind of emotion sparking pieces of content, which I think are also valuable because, we could say put a million ads out there, a million messages. I'm like, why you shouldn't use Notion. But I do think these personal stories and kind of emotional moments are what's going to bring us above every other productivity app that's running an ad.
So we can agree that this was a brand awareness play, not a performance marketing campaign, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And I think one other thing to note is like last year, Notion launched 100 plus product updates. Like we had a year where the focus was like product after product after product. And like, Danielle and I were doing Notion sites, and then we were moving to Notion AI, and then we were moving to Notion charts, and then we were moving to Notion marketplace. And so we had a very fast paced year last year of just product updates. And so we really, in the New Year's campaign, wanted to like take a step back and like get back to the core of what Notion is. And the only reason we've been able to be successful is through our community. And we actually got our last round of funding because we went viral on TikTok. And a lot of that is through the FOMO effect, like people sharing their setups and sharing, what they use on Notion. And so this is really us like getting back to our core and having like fun with the campaign. And, I'm sure our next campaign will be very product focused because that's just how things work at a company like Notion. But this was kind of a time to just have fun and like let people know, like, this is who we are. This is Notion's brand. And this is why you should, potentially use our product because we're creating these experiences for you.
And I love this comment here from actually a previous guest and a brilliant B2B marketer. Shout out Nicole. I'm flashing her comment on the screen here. People forget that influencer marketing doesn't always have to be about conversions. And I'm sure you guys have seen Nicole across LinkedIn. She's incredible. And again, a previous guest. And I think also people forget that, yes, it comes down to performance at the end of the day, but your performance marketing improves when you have better brand awareness because you don't have to sell what it's okay, I know what Notion is, let's dive into the features. So a good mix is super, super, super important. And shout out Nicole, we love you over here at Creator Match. And then this great comment here from Ali talking about thought leadership and B2B deals, which is so important. So the next part I want to dive into is the team of two, right? Which is crazy how much you guys do at Notion with a team of two. Do you think that lean team of two is an advantage in that since you're running such a lean team, you don't have 3 years to strategize? Like you have to time box things and say, okay, like let's execute, let's move quickly. I mean, we only had, I want to say like 3 weeks to bring this to life together. It was aggressive. It was during the holidays. It was 50 plus creators activating. It was a lot. But do you think that's an advantage to move so quickly that it's so effective?
I do. Because I've been on a team, like I've had a team of like 10, and then now Danielle and I have been a team of 2 for like over 2 years now. And I do feel, there would definitely be pros to having a larger team. Like there's a lot of things that we can't do. And so a lot of times we have to focus on like prioritizing and what we can actually execute. And Danielle and I have an entire laundry list of things we would love to do. We just don't have bandwidth. And there's so many influencers that want to work with Notion. And at the end of the day, it's just us two, and we do have to prioritize. But I think the benefit of a lean team is we work fast. Danielle and I work fast, and there's no questioning. There's no in between. We don't have time to like harp on something and like take it a million different ways. It's like, let's make a plan. Here's our plan. Let's see if we can bring in, partners like Creator Match and other agencies to help us scale this. But like at the end of the day, like, her and I are doing a lot of the heavy lifting of like reaching out to influencers ourselves, figuring out, how we can automate a lot of things on the back end. But I love it. Like I kind of thrive in like a chaotic environment. And so like getting things done with just 2 people, like we kind of do the impossible, and the reward at the end is always like the biggest payoff, because it's like, we're very proud of what we've built because it's her and I. Like we built it. Like we didn't just touch one little thing on it. Like we did the whole thing, which is always like a good benefit to your portfolio and resume as well.
So
definitely thrive in the chaos. So
yeah. And I think same here. It's like that startup mentality. Even though obviously Notion is a massive company, it's almost pretending that you are a mini startup within a much larger company. Like the influencer marketing team acts as lean as a bootstrap startup, let's say. And if I'm a marketer listening to Money Mondays and I see that you guys are having such success with a 2-person influencer marketing team, but obviously are also outsourcing specific parts and pieces of different things within the marketing world, how does Notion think about what to keep internally versus what to outsource to an agency like, let's say, Creator Match?
That's a good question. A lot of it is, again, just on the fly. But I think the internal stuff, like a good example is when we launched Notion AI, actually. Like I think AI is a very complex thing to a lot of people. And Danielle and I, it was just us, and we didn't have time to bring in any like outside agency. And we also just didn't have the budget at the time either. We had to be very lean with the money we had. And so that is a benefit where it's like you're doing everything in-house, and like we know the product because we are around it every single day. And so when you're launching like maybe something that's more core to the brand and more of like a product feature, I do think doing a lot of it in-house is of a huge benefit, because even with Notion AI, like when Danielle and I started getting drafts, we were like, okay, we don't actually think people are really understanding like the full capabilities of Notion AI. And so her and I actually sat down and we're like, okay, we're just going to demo every single influencer we're working with. And there were like 200 of them. And so we were doing 15-minute slots like on our calendar, being like, okay, we're just demoing this to every influencer. And because we were so close to the product and we knew all the updates, because like, things were coming in the hour, basically, it was a huge benefit for us to just do everything in-house. But I think for this campaign, because it was such a viral moment and like it was pretty clear, like, Notion Faces is a tool, it's a campaign, it's very easy to use, like, relying on some agencies actually benefited us, because we were able to do more with a very minimum amount of time we had. Like, I think if it was just her and I for this campaign, like there would not have been this massive reach. But because we were able to bring like agency partners for LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram, because we had a couple we worked with, it was a huge, like, it actually helped us create a viral moment because we had a lot more hands to like help us reach out to influencers.
And I don't think it was just a viral moment. I want to like officially stamp this as a LinkedIn takeover. And what I mean by that is, you can see here, I'm still on the LinkedIn feed right now. I think you can see my homepage on LinkedIn. I'm going to open up our Creator Match Chrome extension. We have this sponsorship spotlight that grabs all the sponsored posts in the feed. And literally you can see I mean, like tons of these. You can see a lot of them being Notion faces, a lot of the creators that were in our campaigns, almost like every other sponsored post was from Notion, which is just crazy, right? And it goes back to kind of what Danielle was saying, where, you know, you want to have this big splash. And instead of just something trickled over a long period of time, we can even sort this, let's say high to low shares, and how shareable this moment was, right? How relatable, how much FOMO it created. And what's crazy as well is we can say even rest of world, so not just the US, there were still a lot of creators that were global, which is just so amazing to see. So the next part I want to bring up is these loading images. So this was actually something that we kind of co-created very, very, very last minute. We had a couple questions where it was like, how much lead time did you have for a lot of these ideas? Even having you guys on Money Mondays was very last minute as well. It wasn't anything baked into a contract or a plan. So these loading images, you can see here in the bottom left of your screen, actually crushed it from teasing the launch the day before. This post alone got 40,000 views, and you can see some of the screenshots here from some comments saying, I have FOMO. You know, what are you talking about? I can't unsee it. What's happening? I've had this question all day long. I've been trying to figure this out. I want to join the club. Again, going back to FOMO. So how do you think about these launch moments? Is there a launch playbook that Notion has internally, or is it just, again, building on the fly?
Building on the fly, I would say. I think the idea was actually originated that we wanted to have kind of like, I think Lexi had came up with the idea like the missing, like a missing poster on like the original idea was like a missing poster on a milk carton or something like that. And then it kind of evolved into like, okay, maybe we could have like blank images. Everyone changes their profile picture to like a blank image with like a loading screen. And then maybe that came out of actually a brainstorm with Creator Match. And then, you know, kind of, again, with the LinkedIn terms and conditions for profile pictures, ended up just being the loading banner. But still, I mean, I think it still created a lot of attention, which was awesome. And that's kind of what we were looking for. And it also helped too that, you know, we did it on a Friday. We had all until Tuesday the next week for people to kind of tune in. But no, I definitely think there isn't quite a playbook. I mean, we know what works well for us in terms of like our influencer marketing strategy and what kind of posts perform well for us. But again, I think this was also kind of a campaign that we didn't really quite have a precedent for either. So we're lucky we can still work in a way that we can spit out ideas and just kind of execute on them, like Lexi said, in a fast, efficient manner.
Yeah. And I think honestly, our superpower at Notion is I don't think you can have a playbook actually when it comes to like influencer and social campaigns. Like, I think the people who do great in those fields are the people who actually evolve and are open to change and like know that, you know, the thing that worked last week isn't going to work this week. And so Danielle and I are always like approaching each campaign where it's like, how can we do something different? How can we do something that no one's ever done? And that ends up being our strategy. So a lot of what we do is just brainstorms that we have like maybe a couple weeks before we start putting the influencer brief together. Not even weeks, honestly, probably days. And it's just like, okay, how can we make this different? How can we make it stand out? How can we, you know, do something that people are going to like relate to? And so, yeah, working on the fly, I would say, is our superpower. Because I think if you had a playbook for influencer marketing you would be updating it every 10 minutes because it's always changing.
Yeah, it's again just crazy how aggressive the timelines were, but how amazing the launch was, especially during the holidays, which was just insane. And the number of creators I think people didn't really fathom. I know there's a ton of, let's say, UGC content I have, obviously. Luke pulled up here looking at some of the sponsored content, like this one was this, you know, Second Brain Notion post here with his Notion image. But what was crazy is that there were literally 50 plus creators in this campaign. You can see a lot of those Notion faces here on the screen, 50 plus for a LinkedIn takeover. And I want to know about that number. So the first thing is why 50? You know, was it something that Lexi and Danielle said, okay, we need this number to make that splash? Or is it more so predicated on the spend that you wanted to make, and 50 kind of just was the number that we ended up getting? Where did that 50 come from the strategy?
I think it was just how much budget we had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it came down to the budget. And I mean, 50 sounded great. I think when we were having our initial calls, AJ, you asked that, like, how many creators would you want? And I think I said as many as possible. But yeah, I think I said around 50 sounds right. Again, also keeping in mind, like, we have the background knowledge on like how much the average post for a LinkedIn piece of content is. So no, I mean, I think it was amazing that we hit this number. Again, kind of was just something that fell into our laps based on how much spend we had, but it worked out. It worked out for us.
Amazing. And also, I see a bunch of questions in the chat, which are so exciting. We'll make sure to have a couple questions at the end. I see some questions from Nicole, Rob, Maxim, etc. So we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So going around that 50 creator set again, what was super interesting as well is you guys gave us an initial set of past partners to work with, as in people that you've worked with previously at Notion. And then the leftover spend was net new partners. And it was interesting because it wasn't one or the other, it was both. So one part was, okay, let's make sure that we reactivate previous partners. So it wasn't a one-off thing. And let's activate new partners to get them in that Notion ecosystem. So where did that come about in that, I keep saying strategy, but in that playbook around activating past partners and then activating net new partners to dive into this creator mix?
Well, I think the activating past partners actually goes back to the point that someone who, was looking at the campaign said, where it's like, this wasn't about anything with the product, like, what was the actual goals? And we wanted to go after past partners actually, because those people have spoken about Notion before and they've presented their use cases to their audiences, and their audience are already familiar with Notion, and maybe they signed up for Notion through those partners. And so we wanted to go after those people because it's like, we're going to have a better actually like probably click-through rate with their audience of people going to the tool because they're already familiar with Notion. And then the new partners, I think Danielle and I we always want to bring in new people because thankfully on LinkedIn especially, Notion is very well known. So they've probably you've probably heard about Notion if you've been on LinkedIn or if you're in B2B. And so we wanted to just make sure we're touching new audiences even to further the full reach of the campaign. And I know we're talking about that 50 number, but actually like on the social listening side, we saw that like 900 people posted about Notion Faces. So we had some of that FOMO effect happening on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of it was, from previous partners, but also like that mix of new partners too, because we're touching new audiences. And like 900, that's a lot of like UGC to get for a campaign. Like we didn't pay for any of that, So it's like a huge win for us.
Yeah, I think it came down to like 80-20 new or returning versus new, which I think for us was like a pretty good mix again, because this was for our community. So kind of celebrating like those partners. And I think even if you look at the creators that we worked with, they're creators that we've been working with for a long time, or just, maybe in the last year. Again, we've been doing LinkedIn marketing for like 2 years now, which I guess is a long time in the LinkedIn ecosystem, but was also kind of like a celebration moment for them for, partnering with us over all the years and supporting us as well.
And the UGC was just, insane. You could just type in @Notion or hashtag Notion Faces, and it was everywhere. Even Darren, who's attending right now, I'll pop up his comment here. He said, I wasn't even part of the campaign, but I made a post about it. It hit 40,000 people. And today, 3 people have asked me about Notion, right? It talks about just the overall effect. And people had hot takes, the key takeaways, how this affected community building and FOMO, what they could have done differently, et cetera. And the FOMO was everywhere. And I think one of the craziest parts that we took away, and we've never seen this before, is there was literally fan art. Like think about, and this is LinkedIn. This is not Instagram. This is not TikTok. This is not YouTube. There's literally fan art. So shout out to our friend Casey, who literally made a post saying, hey, Notion, I hope you don't mind. I customized my profile picture. And then people in the comments are saying, I want one. And I did the same. And now he's literally making these custom Notion Faces variations people can add. And if you look at my profile right now, it's the bottom right corner here, which is just crazy, right? So the UGC was super surprising. The fan art. Was there anything else surprising internally? So take me through the day after launch. What was the internal Slack channel like at Notion, right? Like what was Danielle saying to Lexi? What were your teams telling you on the influencer marketing? What was the internal reaction at the company?
I think the biggest splash, to be honest, was Snoop Dogg. I think it was kind of like a slow burn, right? Posts were starting to go live. And then all of a sudden Snoop Dogg post and everyone was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like I never thought that this would be on my Notion bingo card or whatever. And then after that, I think I had so many people coming up to me in the office and saying, all I can see is Notion Faces. Like it's all I see. So there was a lot of excitement. But I think Snoop Dogg definitely made the biggest splash.
Made the biggest splash. And then another thing that the internal team was really excited about is when we actually had friends who were messaging us at other companies and like sending us like their Slack channel, someone being like, oh my gosh, have you guys seen this? And then everyone like posting in the thread their Notion face. Like we love that because it goes back to like, Notion is a B2B tool. We also have the B2C side, but people at companies are like having fun with this. And it's a campaign that seems very consumer, more so brand, but it just shows like the reach you can have by just like creating a surprise and delight moment for people. And so everyone was a buzz. Like Danielle and I were like the heroes. I was happy to come into work those 2 days.
Yeah, me too. I think it was a good reminder too that like this is how like our magic is our community, and that this was just exemplary of how everyone showed up. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
And Lexi, I had the same thing. I had friends texting me and they sent a screenshot of their Slack channel within their company, right? Like how it's not just, hey, in a group chat with friends, especially B2B. If you can get in another company's Slack channel, that's something that we think about when we're running a lot of these marketing campaigns for brands. Is like, will it get shared, right? Whether it's relatable, educational, funny, I want to join. Obviously here it's like, hey, you can create your Notion face, which is just so exciting. The next piece I want to talk about is the headshot transformation. Right. So it wasn't just having creators and activating them to make a post about Notion, but it was also changing their headshot. And I think people don't realize how known you become for your personal brand, but almost renting their personal brand for a small period of time. And even people who didn't make a post were changing their headshot. You can see this headshot transformation here from an amazing creator, Swati, who was also in the campaign. And it went from her normal headshot to that loading banner to then this Notion face. So how did that come about, and how did that headshot change really kind of get created in that inspiration and brainstorming stage?
I can't remember where that came up from, but it was definitely an early conversation, I think. Again, as you post and it's like, that's the first thing people look at. Yeah. Like I noticed when people I follow change their profile photos. So yeah, it was kind of like one of those things that I think even when it first came up, I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to want to do that, but it was a nice surprise that everyone was willing to play along.
Yeah. And I think too, one thing we've seen on like the social side and just like our community in general is actually like a lot of them, because they saw like Ivan and like a lot of Notion employees were changing to like our illustrations that we all got. Like people were being, commissioned to make ones outside of Notion. And then we were all laughing because like sometimes people would like take the Notion employee ones and like use it as their own because maybe they thought it like looked like them. And so we had seen it done in the past where people wanted to like change their profile picture to their Notion illustration. And so I think we kind of played off of that where it's like, okay, we've seen it done when like it's not even a Notion branded thing. So how can we actually make it Notion and like make it the real Notion avatar and get people to want to change their profile picture? And it stands out. I mean, when you're scrolling through LinkedIn and, you're seeing headshot after headshot after headshot, and a lot of them have the same, orange background, pink background, like a Notion face really does stand out. And so it's definitely a nice surprise that people were like willing to do it. Cause I think Danielle and I were like, I don't know, like LinkedIn's like the professional networking platform. Yeah. Like, are people going to want to change their profile picture? But people were pretty down, and we've seen a lot of people who weren't even in the campaign doing it as well. So I think it's definitely like a huge win.
And that's the craziest thing. It wasn't just UGC content from the campaign. It was, hey, I saw this, I'm going to make a UGC post and I have FOMO. So I'm going to change my headshot to a Notion face. I think the biggest difference was that Notion employees have had it for years. Like Ivan has had it for years, right? Since he started the company, and a ton of other Notion employees, and almost welcoming the community like into the office, saying, hey, this used to be just a perk for employees, but we're going to make it for everybody. And it was such an exciting way. And also it was so unique. It wasn't just the Notion logo. It was the Notion branding, but with your own personal element, which was just amazing. I want to talk about LinkedIn as a channel. A lot of brands are thinking about LinkedIn, and the amount of calls I'm in, even with creators who don't realize that they have 200,000 followers on LinkedIn, they can monetize that, or brands who didn't realize creators or influencers exist on LinkedIn. Why LinkedIn as a channel, and kind of where do you see it going this year?
Yeah, I think going back to the like shareability and engagement on LinkedIn, it's definitely more. I think things just travel a little bit more on LinkedIn right now because engagement is just a little bit less cringe than it is on other platforms. I think the comments is a really strong tool within LinkedIn. So again, I think it was also kind of the mix of where can you share an image, like your portrait, and then accompany it with text. And we also have, of course, a big community on LinkedIn, people who are wanting to get involved in the conversation around Notion. But that being said, I do think video is going to be the next big thing on LinkedIn. So who knows, maybe our next campaign will be a video campaign.
Yeah. I think LinkedIn, I mean, we've been a big believer at Notion on LinkedIn for influencer partnerships for a while. I think the first LinkedIn campaign we did was back in like 2022. And it's because I've seen like a shift in LinkedIn. I feel like a lot of people saw this shift where it was at one point very professional, very buttoned up. This is where you go to get a job only. But from there, it's like it's become more thought leadery. And then now it's like I look at it as actually becoming like a social media platform. Like I catch myself randomly scrolling through LinkedIn and I know I'm not the only one. And so I think it's, a great platform for brands to get on because it reminds me of TikTok in the early days. Like I was doing TikTok influencer marketing when it was still called Musical.ly, and it was just like a gold mine because it's like so easy to get creators. There's not a lot of brands, doing it. And so I think the same can go for LinkedIn. I think we're maybe already at like the point where LinkedIn is becoming more of a big platform and there are a lot of brands on it, but I think we're still at the forefront. And it stands out. I feel like the brand partnerships on the platform actually stand out because people are like less used to seeing them and people are actually more curious and interested to dive into them.
So the next thing, and one of the big parts of this campaign that was on top of already it being so crazy, was the physical gifting element. I'm going to pop an image here from our friend and amazing creator in this campaign, Zoe. You see her eating the Notion Faces cookie. And it was so fun getting a physical gift box. And I think it's so rare, especially in the software or B2B space, to get a physical gift box. And I even made a post about that this is going to be a huge trend this year. And I think it's wide open, and gifting is such a big trend for other industries, B2C, Instagram, TikTok, etc. But it's wide open for LinkedIn. So why add this physical gift boxing moment? Because obviously it came with a large cost, but how important was this? Because I saw a ton of content here and there was FOMO from the cookies, and shout out to Liam as well. Liam in the chat here, he made a post with his whole family eating the cookies, and it was just such a fun way to dive again into that community. So what was the importance of physical gift boxing?
Well, I think it makes it stand out, and then I think too, it goes back to that, like if you can hold a brand in your hands, I think you're going to build more brand affinity with them. And I think for the cookies, everything kind of just worked out like perfectly. Where like we partnered with Funny Face Bakery. They do everything hand drawn, which goes back to like the illustrated aspect of the campaign being all hand drawn. And I think gifting, it is a large cost, but it's actually not when you look at the impressions you get. Like, you can spend $10,000 on a gifting campaign to, 150 influencers. And yeah, that's a lot of money to spend on a gift. But if you look at the impressions that you get from people posting about that gift, like it actually comes to a much lower CPM than any of your influencer partnerships will. So to me, it's like one of the biggest bang for your bucks is you're getting a physical gift to your partners. It's a surprise and delight. They can hold your brand in their hands. And it's going to be cheap from a CPM perspective. Like people are usually going to post about it if it's interesting enough. And I think on the tech side, a lot of people are, used to just getting the hats and the water bottles. And so at Notion, we try and be a little bit different where we want to give people things they'll actually use and actually want. Like, around Christmas, a lot of times so many brands are gifting. So we didn't want to do a physical object that people had to like throw, in their cabinet with their 7 million other water bottles. We wanted something that people could enjoy. And so I saw a comment if the cookies are edible. Yes, they're 100% edible. And Funny Face Bakery, Danielle says, has the best chocolate chip cookies in New York. Yep. So if you're ever in the area.
The gooey cookies, they're very good.
Yeah.
I think brands need to be creative too, because we don't have a physical product that we can give out to people. Like a beauty brand, for example, it's so much easier to do gifting when you have actual product. So I will say for all the brands that are thinking about this, what's something that actually reflects your brand? Like if your brand was a product, what would it be? And I think that's something we always talk about internally too, like what actually makes sense to kind of bring Notion as a brand into a physical thing. So yeah, the Funny Face was just it was a win.
I was going to say they were definitely edible because I ate 3 of them in one sitting and they were delicious. I know Liam and your family, Liam, if you're still in the chat, I know you sent a picture, as well as shout out to Mike Petito from Teal. He also shared a kind of a family photo. Everyone took the cookies. It was so fun. And again, it's adding that physical element to something that doesn't exist like software, which is amazing. So the last part here, super rapid questions, and then we're going to dive into some Q&A. I always love to end Money Mondays with some advice. So, I would say the room is pretty much split into brand marketers as well as creators. So let's actually start with the creator side. So for creators, what advice would you give to creators looking to collaborate with brands for more campaigns, especially of this scale, whether it's with Notion or other brands? If I'm a creator, how could I get involved? How could I get seen? I know your inboxes are probably way crazier than mine, and mine's already crazy, but how could I get on Notion's roadmap or an other, brands table to get seen?
Yeah, maybe I have a hot take. I don't know, but I think when I was reviewing new influencers that we hadn't worked with, I noticed that there is a trend, and Lexi and I talk about this all the time on LinkedIn, where like every single creator's post is like cookie cutter, similar. They're following some sort of formula, and I like totally respect that, and I think it works for a lot of people. But for something like this, it was a fun campaign, and I didn't want it to be, the Notion Faces content to stand out against the rest of their content as being something that looked off or wouldn't fit in. Again, we wanted it to feel authentic. So I guess my biggest advice is, obviously think about what works best for you. It's, your feed, your algorithm, your business. But I do think it's important to show personality, have a little bit more fun in your content, to make us as brand marketers see your content too as fitting into something that could be, not just a cookie cutter, like promote our product and share these 3 reasons why you like it. I think it's good to diversify, especially because we might not always come to you for the same type of campaign.
I love that. So let your personality shine through, basically.
Yeah.
And I also saw a post that you made, Danielle, and I'm seeing your post. Same with Lexi, you guys are posting more on LinkedIn, which I love. I saw, Danielle, you said something about you get a ton of creator outreach, but you always you're like, why did you not link your media kit or your profile, whatever it is? Can you talk about
You'd be shocked the amount of times it happens.
It happens a lot. Yeah.
And they'll just sign their first name. No other context.
Yeah. One thing that stood out recently, though, is I was looking through my LinkedIn requests, and the people who had Notion Faces, I was like more inclined to respond to them if they had it as a profile picture, because I was like, oh, cool, they saw the campaign and they're having fun with it. And so a funny little way to get our attention, but that definitely did stand out when I was going through my requests and messages after the past week.
You're about to get hundreds of DMs with Notion Faces, which I love. That actually is a really interesting strategy. All right, other side of the table. I'm a brand marketer listening to Money Mondays. I want to do something similar to my brand. I want to make a splash. I want to be memorable. I want to create FOMO. I want to build community. We talked a lot about tips and learnings and takeaways, but what is that kind of one parting piece of advice that you give me as a brand marketer to take away to say, I want to be more similar to Notion and do my own thing with my own brand?
Don't overthink it. I think a lot of people sit around and overthink and like think of all the different ways something could go wrong versus thinking about all the different ways something could go right. And so I think with Danielle and I, it's like we're big on testing and learning. Like this campaign could have flopped at the end of the day. Like it truly could have. Like it could have been, weird, and people were like, why am I seeing this? And if we weren't, willing to just try it out, then we would have never seen these results. And so I think if you're like a brand marketer or someone looking to do more influencer marketing, just know that some of it will fail. I've had huge flops in my career, but it's like, sometimes it really does work and the payoff is great. And so just try not to overthink it too much and just try new things.
I love it. Such great advice. And we're going to dive into some Q&A. I promised everybody that we'd save some time at the end. So I'm going through the comments here. I know there's a lot of questions about Snoop Dogg, so we'll start there. And also just flashing on the screen as well, if anybody wants to get access to the Chrome extension that I was sharing, you can grab it here. Just type in Creator Match Chrome extension on Google. So Nicole asked, I'm so curious to know more about Snoop Dogg and Corporate Natalie. Obviously, they are, not even macro, mega influencers. Most people didn't even know that Snoop Dogg was on LinkedIn. How do you think about partnering with small to mid-sized creators versus those much larger creators who come obviously with a high ticket price?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for a lot of campaigns, Danielle and I like to look at it as a triangle. And it's like, the high tier influencers, you should have at least 2 or 3 of these to really get that reach. Because with the mid tier and the micro, you never know. Like sometimes they're post can really pop off and get you the millions of views, but sometimes like, the algorithm isn't their friend that day, and it doesn't get as many views as you thought. And so I think the reason we looked at like Snoop Dogg and Corporate Natalie is like Snoop Dogg kind of like fell on our lap. He is someone who's trying to become a top voice on LinkedIn. Like he's really trying to up his B2B presence. And so we felt like it would be very novel and would like stand out for people to be like, what, Snoop Dogg partnered with Notion? And it definitely did. Like I think it got us that wow factor. But then Corporate Natalie is like, she is someone that a lot of people and professionals follow because she has humor content. So we know like the audience is already there, and we've also already worked with her. We worked with her on Instagram. And so it was just an easy collab to just bring into the fold. But I think they're very different. And I kind of like that strategy. And I think we'll implement it more with these larger campaigns, is like, let's get two people that are massive, that aren't even remotely related, so that we can touch two completely different sides of like a platform. And I think we definitely accomplished that. And I know Danielle worked a lot on the Snoop Dogg partnership, and so she probably has some things she learned as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with every celebrity partnership, things never go easier or expected. So that's probably my best advice. Always just roll with the punches and be flexible, and things might just, come to the last minute, but it always works out. And I think Snoop Dogg also was a great partner for us because he has such a recognizable face and personality that, one, if you saw his Notion face, you would probably still be able to tell that it was him. And then two, he has, again, like Lexi said, that shock value, because so many people don't know that he has a pretty big, or is trying to work on a tech presence. So yeah, it was pretty awesome. And he's also, a humorous guy, so it kind of made sense. We're lucky too at Notion that we are a platform that can really be used by anyone. So we do have the privilege of being able to work with someone like a Snoop and a Corporate Natalie, and they could both, resonate with the product.
I love that. And the next part from Ali was around, how do you think about a budget for this, right? I mean, this wasn't a campaign that was in the sense, right? It definitely was a campaign that you had to spend, but I mean, it was mass brand awareness. How do you think about budgeting, and how do you think about, a return on that budget? I know it was brand awareness, so it wasn't tied to necessarily conversion, but, internally, how do you think about budgeting for this?
For this, it was an interesting budget conversation, because it was like, we need to make it go viral. And sometimes what you have to do that is you do have to just spend. And so we did have a very healthy budget, which helped us get the reach we were hoping for. The campaign is still very much active. So Danielle and I haven't like pulled the full metrics report yet to see like, if we hit the CPM we were hoping for, to see the full click-throughs of like, everyone who went to Notion Faces. So we're still, getting those metrics to be, so that we can back it into like, hey, this was worth it. But I think if you're trying to create a moment, money definitely helps, but there are scrappy ways to like make moments without budget. I think it's just, the company you work for, how much they're willing to like put into it. Thankfully, we've seen a lot of success at Notion with influencer marketing from previous campaigns, and we know that it does make a mark. So it's a little easier for us to get budget. But yeah, I don't think there's like a set way to explain the budget for this, because Danielle and I were even like, we were very happy with the budget we got. We were like, okay, we can actually like, we can spend and we can make a mark with this.
Of course. And with that budget, Ben asked around certain KPIs or metrics like CPM, is in these large brand awareness. And like you said, I want to create a moment, right? Like we splashed LinkedIn this, I think it's still going, but like that entirety of last week, all you could talk about was Notion Faces, posts, UGC, creators, the cookie boxes, etc. So is a KPI tied to a campaign of this size, or is it more so like, wow, we took over LinkedIn? You can't quantify that, but we took it over. Obviously, there's going to be a recap and report, but is there a CPM that you are trying to back into? Like, I want to beat my ads CPM, or the CPM of $100 is what I'm shooting for.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, we try and stay close to our growth team. We haven't really been running a lot of ads at Notion, so we don't know what the most recent like benchmarks are, but we try and hit around like $20 to $40 CPM when we can, just because we've done it in the past. And so that has kind of like set the standard for us. We're willing to, flex, especially when we're booking larger creators, to, go above that. But we try and hit, $20 to $40. And I think what we can do, like let's say we didn't hit that on the influencer side, I think what we could say is we could actually back in a lot of the UGC that was generated organically, and we can take those metrics and be like, we hit this CPM on the influencer side, but here is all of the basically free impressions we got because of that FOMO effect that we didn't have to pay for. And so these influencer partnerships definitely helped, contribute to the buzz. And so I think there's different ways you can kind of slice and dice the data to make it be successful no matter what. But yeah, we're still kind of figuring out the best formula for
also
CPM.
Keeping in mind that we're running YouTube, Instagram, TikTok content all at the same time as well.
Yeah.
No off days for the influencer marketing team at Notion. I thought this was such a cool comment from Maxim here, where he said, as a Gen Z college student, this content shift of this more fun, relatable content on LinkedIn made me feel more comfortable starting on the platform. And I think, the old days of super buttoned up corporate suit and tie, I'm only going to post about, I'm happy to announce, is over, right? And like, you still have those, but it's more so about, I'm struggling to find a job and talking about like one of my best posts from 2024 was about the failures of 2024, not the wins, right? And having this content shift is going to be huge for the platform. So we spoke a lot about, obviously, money, right? It's Money Mondays, this big splash. But someone in the comments had a great question. He said, okay, well, if I'm a brand and maybe I'm a startup or I don't have an influencer marketing budget just yet, right? And I want to make a big impact, but I don't have the budget. What are some ideas you have? And you said, Lexi, as well, that there are some ways you can get creative with, a pretty small amount of spend. What are some of those creative ways? What would you recommend to a startup to still make that moment, but not spend, and have that large budget?
Gifting campaigns. They really do work. Like, I joined a company before Notion that was only 20 employees and we had no budget. So we really had to make magic out of nothing. And I think gifting campaigns is where we always thrived, because you can really take, $10,000 and make it reach millions. And then from there, like with the gifting campaigns, thinking through like, how can we make this different? How can we make this viral? When I worked at Curology, the first gifting campaign I did, I had a $10,000 budget and I was like so scared to do anything because it was like the first time, I've like played with that much money on a marketing budget. But we made, because Curology was a skincare brand, we made basically a little selfie kit where like we put like random funny novel things in there, where like a fan that plugged into your charging port and like turned on, like, so that when you're taking your selfie, and then we had like a ring light. And that kind of like went viral because it was like no one had ever seen, a ring light for your phone, or they'd seen like a fan you can plug in to make your hair blow when you're taking that selfie. And so I think with a smaller budget, gifting really works. And then we all have a phone now, like you can become a content creator yourself. And so I'm a big believer in like, creating your own content as the brand, and figuring out how to insert yourself into culture.
I also think a lot of micro influencers can have the same impact too if the content is good and the messaging is right. So, you don't have to work with a corporate Natalie or Snoop Dogg to make a huge impact. Someone with 2,000 followers can have thousands and thousands of impressions on LinkedIn. So definitely don't shy away from those creators, especially if they have, love for your brand or a good use case or a good story to tell. Sorry, my voice is getting worse as this goes on.
I love it. And another question we have here from Favor off of YouTube, super interesting, actually. No one's asked this angle yet, but we created this moment. What happens next, right? So like, are there plans to follow up? Do you do a Notion Faces part 2? Is there a sequel to the prequel? How do you think about that next one? Are you going to now dive into the performance element and now have those same creators talk about Notion AI and the new features? Or is it another brand awareness campaign? I guess, like, what's the follow-up from this campaign at this moment?
I think there's just so many options of where we could take this. I think, as at Notion, we definitely want to make this something that's more evergreen and, just, weaves in and out of our content over time. We don't want it to be like a one and done thing. And so even with a lot of like our support requests we've been getting, it's like we send people a form to give us any feedback of like what they would like to see in the tool, because we're wanting to continue to iterate on it and add more things. And I am thinking about it in the way of like, when you made your Bitmoji, and then like how other brands could come in, and like now you have the Abercrombie and Fitch clothing pack. Like, how can we do that for Notion Faces, where it's like we're constantly adding elements that re-engage people? And I think too, like, because you can add it into the product, it also just becomes evergreen, because you can make your Notion face, your Notion avatar in the actual tool. And we want to, add maybe like a badge for our ambassadors. Like we want to just figure out how we can keep it engaging and keep it going. And I'm sure there's moments like back to school that will feel very organic to, reactivating Notion Faces. But I think we're still figuring it out and we're open to any suggestions, but we definitely want to keep it evergreen because it is very much like our DNA of, Notion Faces and illustrations.
I think we're also like, we received so much data from this one that we can take so many learnings from this, whether it's creator level performance or even just like messaging that resonates. So we have a lot of digging to do after this, but I'm sure there's a lot of great takeaways that Lexi and I will just iterate into future campaigns.
And a couple people are asking if this will be recorded. We're setting a full recap of some of the best responses from Danielle and Lexi in our newsletter. Just go to our website, creatormatch.com, and go and subscribe to our newsletter. The final question I want to end on, it's a pretty fun question from shout out Bree, is did Snoop get any cookies?
I don't think he did. And I think it's just because I've tried to gift celebrities. It is very hard to get over that barrier.
Someone on his team got that.
Yeah, we sent it to his team. Yeah. We're not sure if he enjoyed it. We did want to like do a tie-in of like Snoop and the Notion Face cookies for, late night munchies, but we didn't get that far yet. Maybe that'll be our follow-up campaign.
That's part 2 for this moment. I love it. Well, Danielle and Lexi, I know you guys are super busy again, being that 2-person influencer marketing team at Notion. Thank you so much for the time. Congrats on this incredible success, taking over LinkedIn and other platforms for Notion Faces. It was so fun. And hopefully we'll see so many more fun and creative campaigns on LinkedIn for this year. So thank you so much again for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.